great to have you with us. Can I ask your response, first of all, to David Lammy's announcement in the House of Commons today? You heard Sir Simon there calling it a political manoeuvre designed to basically appease Labour Party members. What's your response to it? Good evening to you.
Good evening, Ben. We are deeply concerned about the decision, and particularly, might I say, its timing. You know, today, 4 of the hostages were being buried, 4 young people kidnapped from a music festival like Glastonbury or Reading, who were held underground for nearly 11 months and then machine gunned to death as the Israeli army was approaching to try and rescue them. So, on that day where that's happening, what is the signalling the government is sending by a decision like this? It gives succour to Hamas, I'm afraid, and the Israelis will conclude that they can't do anything right, even when their young people are being machine gunned in tunnels by Hamas, a terrorist organisation. It's Israel that gets criticised, and I think it was a mistake for the government to make this decision today.
But Phil, isn't this a case of, you say Israel can't do anything right? Israel had the choice of not acting in a way that international experts, including, according to the government, some lawyers inside the Foreign Office, believe might have breached humanitarian law. I mean, that's where the problem arises, isn't it?
Well, I can't tell you all of the advice that the government has received, and I'm not a human rights lawyer. Of course, we want Israel, like all countries, to abide by international humanitarian law. But what I can tell you about is the timing and the politics, and I think the timing communicates. I don't think this is necessarily the government's intention, but it has sent a very, very difficult signal. One that when Israel is reeling from this atrocity and the particular murder of these young people, it's being told you can't continue to try and rescue your hostages because we're going to remove...
It's not. They're not saying that. David Lammy was very clear that Israel has the right to defend itself. He's simply saying that some elements of the Israeli operation in Gaza, particularly around the treatment of detainees, particularly about not doing enough to get aid in, those specific elements might be breaches of international law, and the UK doesn't want to facilitate them. He's not saying Israel can't fight Hamas here.
But they're saying that they can't have weapons that they use in Gaza for the purposes of fighting Hamas and taking and getting the hostages out. I understand
nine in 10 UK arms licenses to Israel will still be in place after today.
Well, that's right. But one of the questions we've been asking government today is what are the things that have been revoked? And one of them is drones. Now, drones, if you're trying to find hostages, you're going to need to fly drones over to try and work out what's happening. And I'm not, as I say, I support the government in terms of trying to work with every country, including Israel, to ensure it abides by international humanitarian law. And it's the case we've made to people in Israel that we speak to in the government there, that they need to be abided by international humanitarian law. But what is the signal making this decision today sending? And I think it's the wrong signal, entirely the wrong signal, as Israel is burying these beautiful young people who were murdered in cold blood by Hamas. Israel has been, let's remember, this war was not one that Israel chose. There was a ceasefire in place on the 6th of October before Hamas launched the single biggest slaughter of Jews on a single day since the Holocaust. That's what we're talking about. They murdered, they raped. There was all sorts of horrors. I mean, I've been to visit some of the towns in southern Israel. They went house to house, murdering families, burning them alive, these sorts of things. Israel has got a legitimate right to defend itself and to stop Hamas trying to do this again. And the UK government must try and send the signal both to Israel and to other allies that actually when a country faces an attack of that kind, it has a right to defend itself, of course, within international law. But we must remember what the timing of such decisions sends. What is the signal it sends to Israel, and what is the signal it sends to Hamas? Hamas just massacred people. It can say, well, we'll massacre people, and Israel will still be punished for that. I think this is absolutely the wrong timing.
Phil, can I just ask you lastly about the scenes that we've seen on the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, other Israeli cities in the last few days? Huge protests at the Netanyahu government, huge pressure now that Netanyahu tonight says he would withstand to get a ceasefire agreement in place to release those hostages. What's your take on that? Those protesters demanding a deal to as the best way to free the hostages. They're right, aren't they?
Well, it's completely understandable. I think we all want to see an end to this horrific war, the death and destruction we've seen in Gaza, the hostages that are being held by Hamas and killed in the cases that we've seen here, the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and a permanent end to Hamas's ability to launch these sorts of attacks. We all want to see a resolution to this conflict. So I can completely understand why many in Israel are taking to the streets. these are not easy decisions. I don't, it's hard to say which way one goes, but the objectives absolutely should be to end this war as soon as possible, to get the hostages out, to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, to rebuild Gaza, and to stop Hamas ever being able to do this again. And I think one of the things that's been lost, sadly, is that we should be looking to a better future where we're pursuing a two-state solution and expanding the Abraham Accords, all the
But you've
things
got
that
an
we should
Israeli
be
Prime
doing.
Minister and, of course, Hamas on the other side that don't want a two-state solution, that are opposed to a two-state solution.
I know that some people find it a difficult choice to make, but there is no better option. We've seen that conflict management does not work, and we need to see moves towards a resolution. So, I would want us in the UK not to be importing conflict, but to be exporting peace. It's something that we want to do. I think, though, that it's important that the government, when it has decisions to make and cards to play, uses them correctly and signals in the right way and at the right time. And I don't think that happened today.
Phil, really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much indeed for joining.